Storytelling is the hardest but most important skill to learn in Daygame. In this podcast episode, I will teach you how to use it to tease, to build attraction, show that you're an interesting guy to talk to, DHV, to lead a conversation to more adventurous topics, to understand whether this is a good opportunity for a same-day lay, etc. Basically, storytelling is the skill that lets you talk about any topic that can come up in a Daygame conversation in an interesting way that builds attraction and leads the conversation where you want it to go. The most important skill in Daygame. Before we even start talking about how you learn storytelling, let me take a few minutes to explain to you why it's such an underrated skill and why it is the most important skill to learn in Daygame. There are two breakthroughs guys have when they start learning Daygame. First is when you really overcome approach anxiety and start approaching hot girls all the time. And I'm not talking about doing it after walking around for an hour because you're still scared. I'm talking about you really are doing it all the time. And the second breakthrough is when you learn some basic teasing. That's when it feels like Daygame is slowly starting to work. All of a sudden the girls aren't telling I have a boyfriend and I have to go all the time, and they're willing to have a little chat with you. And you even start getting some numbers, dates, and a rare lay here or there. But this is where most guys get stuck. They can run basic conversation and get numbers and some dates with girls who already liked them from the get-go. But unless the girl is instantly attracted to the guy from the beginning of the conversation, they still can't seem to figure out how do I make girls like me. And do you remember why you started learning Daygame? Probably because you were fed up that your only dating options were the girls who already liked you, the girls who chose you. You wanted to be able to choose the girls you like and learn how to make them attracted to you. Well, storytelling is your opportunity to do that. Daygame is so hard to learn in the beginning because it has a hockey stick learning curve, as you can see in this picture. The first few minutes of the conversation are the hardest. Girls aren't really responding much, they're not giving you anything, and it's really hard to keep the conversation going. The girls just keep excusing themselves from the conversations, or they give you flaky numbers. If you learn to get to the point in a conversation where the girl is interested in you, also called hook point, the rest of the conversation becomes really easy. And storytelling isn't about telling stories, it's about knowing how to navigate this hard part in the beginning of the conversation where nothing seems to flow, how to do that in a step-by-step way. Leading from barely knowing anything about the girl to her opening up, becoming interested in you, and investing in a conversation. And now let's start looking at how storytelling lets you have better conversations and build attraction with girls. And then I'll teach you how to learn storytelling, starting with basic copy-paste structures and then moving on to learning to improvise and talk about any topic that can come up. And use this skill to make girls who didn't care in the beginning of the conversation to hook and want to go out with you. Why storytelling works. Once you understand the difference between storytelling and simply teasing, you will instantly understand why it works so well. Let's look at a simple scenario. Let's say you open a girl and you find out she's a lawyer. Here you probably do some basic teasing, maybe you accuse her of putting people in jail, you joke about her saving the world as an environmental lawyer or being an evil corporate lawyer who's walking around an office with a whip in her hand. Whatever the tease is, the answer probably is a giggle, a yes or no, or another simple, positive, one-word answer. But she isn't giving you more, she isn't opening up, and she for sure isn't hooked. And this is where most guys get stuck. They find out something about the girl, then they use teasing or other techniques to have an interesting conversation about the topic, but that doesn't go anywhere. They find out another thing about the girl through stacking or asking a question. They try to tease on that again, that doesn't go anywhere again, and then so they continue until they decide to either eject or ask the girl for the number if she hasn't said I have to go or I have a boyfriend yet. Yes, the girls are staying in the conversation for a little bit, but these conversations aren't really going anywhere unless the girl already liked the guy from the open. Well, and this is where storytelling comes in. One statement or tease can get you a short positive answer, but storytelling lets you weave together 2, 3, 4 or even more interesting statements, teases and things to get the conversation flowing. While one tease will sometimes get you a nice positive short answer, a good story will get much better responses. When weaving together multiple interesting things and teases in a story, you might not get a good response to the first thing you say, or you might get a short, simple, positive response, but you have a few more things left in the chamber. Maybe she starts responding to the second thing you say, and by the time you get to the third or fourth thing about lawyers, she's interested, opening up, and starts investing in a conversation. It sounds easy in theory, but there are 3 challenges with this. First, guys get stuck with short teases and stories because they're afraid to go into longer, more elaborate stories unless they know exactly what they're gonna say throughout all the story. Second is learning to come up with 3 or more interesting things on any topic that can come up in a conversation. And the third is just coming up with random facts doesn't really work. You have to come up with interesting things that spark attraction. And in the rest of the podcast episode, I'll show you how to do it. And so in the rest of this podcast episode, we will look at why we start with copy-paste stories, how to have a story on any topic that can come up, how to learn to improvise on any topic that can come up, how to actually learn storytelling, or how do you actually implement these things that we're talking about in real life, the 3 stages of learning storytelling, how to set up your stories so they sound more natural, not really too robotic, common storytelling mistakes I see, and what to do if all of this still isn't working, because storytelling isn't really something that you learn in a few weeks. Yes, this is a very in-depth podcast episode. That's because there are 2 types of podcast episodes I do. One type is for beginner day gamers who are just getting started, some simpler theory, maybe interviews with other day gamers who have been doing pretty good so you get inspired from their journey, or you can learn from the mistakes they've made and how they corrected them. And the other type is the really geeky, in-depth podcast episodes for the guys in my online coaching program. Instead of explaining this stuff to every guy I work with, I spend a few weeks to put together bigger podcast episodes like this one. I make them listen to them, and then we work on implementing all of these things during the monthly one-on-one calls we're doing. Because obviously it's one thing to understand the theory of how all of this works, but it's a completely different thing to be able to implement this in real life. If you are looking for quick fixes to attract girls who don't care about you, then this isn't it, because such quick fixes don't exist. It's only online coaching programs and online courses by, good-looking jacked social butterflies who work for other good-looking jacked social butterflies. My goal is to teach Daygame in a way that works for very different types of guys: computer engineers, busy entrepreneurs, sales guys, spreadsheet experts, etc. So if you are willing to do the work, then this podcast episode will give you most of the theory needed to learn good storytelling to build attraction with all types of girls, most of whom didn't really care about chatting with you when you stopped them. Even if you implement a quarter of what we're talking about here really well, you will be ahead of most of other guys out there. Why do we start learning storytelling with copy-paste stories? The simplest, most popular storytelling technique out there is the old school 3 things technique. It's not the best when it comes to getting good reactions, but it's the best for learning. Let me explain. It looks like this. You find out something about the girl, for example, what she does for a living, where's she from, etc. And you simply say, when I think about the topic she just gave you, I think about A, B, and C. C being a thing that will spark the most emotion, so probably a stronger tease. For example, if she's a lawyer, it might sound something like, when I think about lawyers, I think about 3 things. Thing 1, thing 2, thing 3. Or if you want this to sound a bit more natural, you might say, I have a few lawyer friends and they told me that thing 1, thing 2, thing 3. As a full story, it might sound something like this. Because of my work, I used to work with a lot of lawyers, and I realized that you guys have to study so hard because unless you have a master's degree, you're basically going to be making copies for everyone else in the office. But then when you finally start working in that field, you have to work so hard, it's so competitive, it's a real cutthroat industry. But then one Friday, my lawyer friends, we went out with them for some drinks, and it started all nice and chill in a nice tapas bar with some wine and some snacks. But then by the end of the night, oh my God, I can't keep up with you guys. You go really hard. I'm never going drinking with lawyers again. That must be you. But the secret is that the same story works for absolutely all professions. Whatever she's working, whatever she's studying in a university, you can simply replace the word lawyer with dentist, dancer, or whatever. Okay, for thing one, you're gonna swap out you need to have master's degree, or you're gonna be making copies for everyone else in the office. You skip that, but everyone else, simply replace the word lawyer with whatever her profession is or whatever she's studying. You don't need to change a thing. And by the way, if this is the first time you hear about the 3 things technique, then head over to daygamecourses.com and sign up there to check out my free Daygame course, The Structured Natural Approach, where I explain step by step how to build a good Daygame conversation. Starting from a strong stop on how to start a conversation so she doesn't say she has to go and has a boyfriend all the time, how to make them attracted by teasing and storytelling, what topics to talk about, how to take girls' numbers, and what to do to make sure they will actually respond to your text instead of just flaking after giving you the number. Plus, you'll also get access to my free texting guide to convert more numbers to dates and my free dating guide to convert more dates from, well, some fun in your bedroom. Again, all of that is completely for free on daygamecourses.com. Anyways, back to storytelling. Yeah, this becomes a little bit more complicated when working with other topics, not what she does for a living, but for example, where is she from, but I'll teach you later how to do that too. The goal when you start using the 3 things technique isn't to get amazing reactions, attraction, hook point, and all of that stuff. It's simply to get comfortable to deliver simple stories using the same template. In the beginning, get comfortable to deliver the same copy-paste story in every set, regardless of what she does for a living. The big challenge with this is that most guys don't go into the 3 things technique because they don't have these 3 things on the top of their head. Instead, they do one quick comment or tease, get a mediocre response, and then try to get another topic to do the same thing again, or they start asking super boring questions. They're afraid to go into the 3 things technique because they don't have 3 things they could say, so they simply don't start using the technique at all. This is why we start with a simple copy-paste story for all professions, so you become comfortable delivering one simple copy-paste story in all these situations. You see, this is a stressful situation. You're in front of a girl, your heart is pumping, you don't know what to say, your brain is in fight or flight mode, and your prefrontal cortex, the logical part of your brain, or rather the, hey, what the fuck do I do now? What was the thing I was supposed to say? It's too busy. So the idea is to get it comfortable enough by using the same copy-paste story, and when you can remember to do that, when you're able to deliver the same story all the time, it goes to a different part of your brain. It goes to the autopilot part of your brain, and now all of a sudden you can start thinking about other things. Now all of a sudden your prefrontal cortex can think, okay, what do I actually know about dentists? What can I say here? So, to recap for the 7th fucking time, we use a simple, silly copy-paste story to make sure your brain becomes comfortable with this situation, and then we make these stories interesting later at the next stage of learning storytelling. And don't get me wrong, the goal of Daygame isn't to make you a stupid copy-paste monkey who's repeating the same lines all the time. As Joe Chip, an advanced Daygamer in our group chat with more than 20 years of Daygame experience, said, guys should focus more on being relaxed than what they should say. And the reason you use canned material is not because some words are magic, but because not having to focus on what to say will help you relax. I do have to warn you that when you start using this technique, your game will go to shit. Your results will actually get worse because you will really struggle remembering one copy-paste story. Like, it's gonna be hard, so it's gonna go down. You're gonna have girls rejecting, you're gonna have more numbers flaking. It's gonna be a complete shit show. But then when your brain finally becomes comfortable delivering this copy-paste story, when your delivery becomes better, it's slowly gonna come back together. And when it does, it's gonna come back together to a much higher level. And all of a sudden, things will start working better than they did before. but you can expect to do at least 50 to 100 approaches to kind of get through that rut. If it doesn't come back together even stronger, it means you're doing something wrong, you're not seeing the mistakes you're making. And there is no way for me to tell you what are the exact mistakes you're making, because at this stage it becomes very person dependent, very specific for each person. But if you want me to listen to your recorded day game sets, explain your biggest mistakes and tell you how you can fix them to make your day game results better, then consider joining my online coaching program. You can find all the details about it, how it usually works, the approximate pricing, etc. by clicking the link in the description. And now let's look at how you can come up with simple copy-paste stories for other topics that might come up, where is she from, her hobbies, etc., without having to remember 50 different stories. How to have an interesting conversation on any topic that can come up. Now that you've learned how to build attraction using basic storytelling, if the topic is what she does for a living or what she studies, let's look at how you can have interesting conversations on any other topics that might come up. When a day gamer gets to a pretty high level, let's say at least 30 to 50 day game days, they become bored by doing the same stuff over and over again, and they start experimenting. They discover a lot of stuff that doesn't work, but once in a while, they discover some really cool techniques that no one else had thought about before. When I started my online coaching program in the summer of 2023, I invited my closest day game buddies, all high-level advanced day gamers, to join our group chat, and we used to do these advanced group discussions. Meaning, when we were working on storytelling, all the advanced guys would hop on a group call and we would teach each other our secret tips, tricks, and techniques. The stuff we had discovered over the years, and then these discussions were recorded and made available to everyone in the online coaching program. On one of these calls, Joe Chep, an advanced day gamer with more than 20 years of day game experience, explained how he has simplified storytelling to be able to talk about any topic that can come up. Binary storytelling. While you can use the same story for all professions, you can't use the same story with a girl from Sweden that you would use with a girl from Turkey. But you can probably use the Sweden story with a bunch of countries that are also cold, and you could probably use the Turkey story with many countries that are warm. John suggested simply dividing all topics into groups and using the same story for everyone in each group. One story for warm countries, one story for cold countries, one story for serious professions, one for artistic professions, sporty hobbies, crafty hobbies, etc. I take it a bit further. It doesn't have to be two stories. I like my groups to be a bit more narrow. You can have one story for the East Coast of the US, one for the West Coast, one for the Southern USA, and one for Midwest, for example. One for Southern Europe, one for everything east of Poland, one for the classical old Europe countries like UK, Germany, France, etc. Divide Asia in 2 or 3 regions, one story for all of Latin America. You can go as broad or as narrow as you want. This is the simplest way you can have prepared stories on any topics that can come up. And now let's start looking how to go from delivering copy-paste stories to introducing more and more improvisation in your storytelling. And it's actually easier than you think if you've gotten good at the previous part at using copy-paste stories. How to learn to improvise on any topic. Again, let's take her profession as an example. The copy-paste story you can use on any profession is, when I think about the profession, I think about 3 things. First of all, you guys have to learn so many things. You have to study so hard, it's crazy. But then when you finally start working in the industry, it turns out it's much harder than people imagine. It's a real cutthroat industry. But then once I went out with a bunch of you guys, and well, I'm not doing that again. I can't party with someone who goes that hard. That must be you. But now let's make the same story a bit more relevant to what she's actually doing. Let's look at a lawyer topic we touched previously. Because of my business, I used to work with a lot of lawyers, and I realized that you guys have to study so much. Unless you have a master's degree, you're basically just making copies for everyone else in the office. And when you finally start working in a job, it's a proper cutthroat industry. You have to work really, really hard if you want to get a decent position in one of the big companies. But then once I went out with my lawyer friends, and it started as a chill evening, but then by 3 a.m., oh my God, I realized you guys go hard, but you don't have to work. I'm never going out with lawyers ever again. that must be you. Well, but what if she's, for example, a nail artist? She does those gel nails, for example. I actually have a friend who did it, and I was surprised about how much you have to learn, because there are all these things you have to buy and you have to know how to use, and it's different with each of those things. It's kind of wild. But then when you finally start working there, you realize that it's much harder than you thought, because half of your job is about working with the nails, but the other part is basically being a psychologist, because everyone wants to gossip, everyone wants to talk about their private life, so it's like a big part of their job. But then once I went out with a few people who do that, and there you can use the same thing as with the lawyers, and that must be you. Or maybe she works at a big coffee shop chain like Starbucks, Costa Coffee, or whatever. You know, I have a few friends who used to do that, and I was surprised about how much you have to learn. It's all very systematic. There is a formula for each step you have to do, like how you handle all these situations, everything, how you make each drink, and it's very, very rigid, very structured. I was just blown away by that. But then they told me that once you really start working there, part of your job is being the barista, but the hardest part is you have to learn to deal with all types of customers. You have to know how to handle these really kind of pissed, angry customers. It's so diverse, so crazy with the stuff you see every day. But then I know that everyone in the service industry, they kind of click together, they know each other. So people working in the service industry, they usually know what are the best spots to go for drinks, and everyone knows everyone. It's like one big party. So I was kind of surprised about that. Boom, three completely different professions, but it's pretty much the same story, where we simply took, you have to study hard. When you work there, it's hard, but you all party hard. Yeah, and we simply adapted in each case, we simply changed the story slightly for each profession. And this is how you start learning to improvise in your stories. You start with a story that's 90% copy-paste, and you sprinkle in a little bit, 10% of improvised stuff that's specific for that girl, for her profession, for her city, etc. Once you're comfortable with that, you can add even more improvisation, 20%, 25%, 30%, and so on. Pretty soon you will not only be able to talk about any topic that you have talked about before, but also you might be able to improvise a completely new story if a topic you've never seen before comes up. After all, this is the goal we're building towards by developing your storytelling skills, to be able to have interesting conversations, tell interesting stories full of teases to make the girls attracted to us. 3 stages of learning Daygame. There are multiple stages of learning Daygame. Each one teaches you a new skill that leads to the next breakthrough. For example, at the end of one of the stages, girls stop saying I have to go or I have a boyfriend, and they become more interested in having a conversation with you. There is a reason why guys get stuck at the point where things kinda start to work, because they're slowly starting to get numbers, and once in a while girls even show up on dates. The funny thing is that at this point, guys start to think they know Daygame. After all, they're able to do something almost no one in the world is, to get numbers and once in a while some dates with random girls they met on a street. But the results are inconsistent and unpredictable. That's because they're stuck in a wrong stage. Stage 1 is all about overcoming approach anxiety. It feels like a big achievement, because if you had strong AA, it felt like, oh my god, I can't do this, but once I will, all the doors will open, all the women will be mine, it's gonna be amazing, all I have to do is overcome AA. Once you do, it feels great, but you still have no real results. Stage 2 is all about copy-paste game and some basic teasing. This is where you learn to do a bunch of copy-paste stuff, and I don't mean that it's deliberate. You try something, you see it works, and then you simply keep using it, and it becomes copy-paste. You do a strong stop, girls are finally stopping. Great, you keep doing that. You learn to open pretty well and you become decent at stacking. Great, girls stop saying I have to go or I have a boyfriend, and if they really like you, they're sticking around to actually chat to you. You learn some basic teasing like we talked about previously, and wow, you're getting some numbers, once in a while a date, and once in a blue moon you even get laid. They're getting some results, but unless the girl likes them from the beginning of a conversation, these guys, they can't seem to change the girl's mind. This is the phase I was talking about previously, where guys get stuck, they think they know their game, but they can't really understand why the results they're getting are so inconsistent and why these results are so different from the wild stories they've heard other guys have. This is because they have to move on to the next stage, but to get there, they have to do things that are completely different from what got them results so far. Stage 3, learning to talk about any topic that can come up. This is where you need to learn storytelling. This is what we've been talking about. Yeah, you weave multiple small teases, multiple small things together in an interesting story that sparks attraction, shows that you're an interesting guy to talk to, and makes her open up and invest in a conversation. But to develop this skill, you need to change how you're learning Daygame. During the first stage, you learn to overcome approach anxiety by being in field and approaching. During the second stage, you learn a bunch of copy-paste stuff. A good stop, a good opener, you become decent at stacking, some basic teases. Yeah, you research the best lines, you polish the delivery, and you're learning this all while, again, being in field and approaching. But here's the trick. You can't learn storytelling while approaching. Just trying harder to storytell while you are in front of a girl won't get you there. Instead of remembering a copy-paste opener or doing a quick copy-paste tease, you have to be able to come up with a longer story consisting of multiple things. You have to make sure you're teasing and your delivery is calm and confident. If you're trying to do this while you're in front of a girl, the best case scenario is you're gonna come up with a few shitty things, you're not gonna be able to weave them together in a nice story, and the delivery is gonna be complete crap because you're all over the place stressing just about coming up with anything at all. That's why you have to learn storytelling outside of your approaches. How to learn storytelling. After each approach, you simply ask yourself two questions. First, what is the topic I found out about her? For example, she's from Germany. Second, what can I say the next time I meet someone from Germany? And you think, how can I use the 3 things technique the next time this topic comes up, all while doing this in a teasing way? Most importantly, you should do this right after you do the approach, not when you get home. I mean, if you spend a few minutes thinking about your German story and you really can't come up with anything, okay, that's fine. Open your notes app, write down Germany, go home, and then spend some more time researching and go, hey, what's the story I could tell? Wikipedia and AI will help you a lot. But people who do this in field between their approaches learn much faster. They are developing their storytelling skills each Daygame session, not just theorizing in front of their computer. And don't worry, the next time you meet a German girl, you will fuck up with the story you came up with. You won't remember the 3 things or the delivery will be shit, but that's fine. You will simply ask the 2 questions. First, what is the topic that came up? Germany. Second, how can I make the story that I came up with before even better for the next time I meet a girl from Germany? If by the 5th time you meet a girl from Germany you don't have an amazing, polished story that gets good responses, and what are you doing with your Daygame? Because usually you get the same topics over and over again. Maybe in your city you have a lot of Ukrainians or Brazilians. Perfect. Pretty soon you'll have nice polished stories on these countries, and then if once a month you meet a girl from an Asian country you don't know anything about, that's fine. You only meet her once a month, it doesn't really matter. See whether your stories are getting good responses. Is she responding to the first thing you say, to the second thing you say, or to the third thing you say? Keep polishing these stories. When you're doing this, you're doing 2 things. First, you're building a library of stories you can tell, and second, you're becoming better at coming up with these stories. This is why it's better to do this between your approaches, not when you get home, because over time you'll be able to come up with these stories faster and faster until eventually you'll be able to do this instantly. But another very important thing is happening. Think of all the scenarios, all the situations that can happen in a Daygame conversation. Imagine it like one big mind map. Right now, you know what to do in maybe 3% of all the possible scenarios. Once you play around with, hey, where did I get stuck in a conversation? What can I do the next time this happens? Once you do this enough time, times, over time you will know what to do in 5% of situations, 10% of situations, 20, 30, 40, etc. The more scenarios you can handle, the calmer and more confident you become, and you kind of reach a point where you're able to become calm and confident throughout the whole conversation. And even when you face a situation that you've never seen before, if you have covered enough ground, let's say if you know what to do in 40% of all the situations, there probably has been a similar situation before, and you can simply implement whatever worked in that similar situation, or you might be able to come up with something new on the spot. This is how you become really, really good at Daygame. Daygame isn't about learning to improvise in all the situations. It's about knowing exactly what to do in half of the situations and then being able to improvise whenever something new pops up. And an added bonus for this is, since you're coming up with your own stories, you're not using stories that someone else gave you. You're building your Daygame skills around your true personality. You're not just telling a stupid story about, oh, you know, I went to that city, I got drunk, and I woke up in a park with no pants on. I mean, half of you have probably heard this story before, right? You're building your own stories, so your game is about your real personality. You're not saying the same stuff everyone else is saying. And this is what I teach the guys I work with in my online coaching program. This is exactly why they can see clear progress month after month. I point out their biggest mistakes and tell exactly how to fix them step by step during our monthly coaching calls. I keep them accountable to make sure they're putting in enough volume, going out enough, and fixing these mistakes the right way, and then providing support about any questions they have in the group chat. If you want to check it out, you can find out all the information about the online coaching program in the link in the description. Setting up your stories. Now that you know why storytelling is the most important skill to learn in Daygame, and despite it being the hardest skill to learn, you know how to learn it step by step, let's look at a few more details. First, how to set up your stories so they sound more natural. Saying when I think about accountants, I think about three things, A, B, and C, gets boring fast, and it's not the best way to do it. That's why we set up our stories. For example, I have a few accountant friends, and they told me that, and here comes your story. I used to work with a bunch of lawyers in my business, and I realized that I watched a documentary about Brazil and it said that, or my ex was a dentist, so I know that dentists, and again, here comes your story. And this even lets you use the three things technique multiple times in one Daygame conversation without it being obvious. Common storytelling mistakes. Up until now, I've explained you why storytelling is the most important skill to learn in Daygame and why it's the hardest skill to learn. It's about much more than just learning to build attraction with girls who in the beginning of the conversation didn't really care to talk to you. And now you know how to learn it, starting with basic copy-paste stories and building up to improvise stories on any topic that can come up. Now let's look at three common storytelling mistakes. First, the story is not about yourself, it should be about the girl. When I started coaching one Italian guy, he in the beginning thought that the stories he's telling should be about him. That the idea behind storytelling is to show that you're a cool guy and that you and the girl have a lot in common, but this is absolutely wrong. One of the main goals of storytelling is to get a girl to respond and start investing in a conversation. Because of this, the story has to be about her. And you don't need to show her that you are similar. Instead of building rapport, you can break it. You can build attraction by breaking rapport with teasing. Second mistake, let's talk about how the story is a medium to deliver a story about a girl. When you're telling a story about lawyers, it's not a story about lawyers. Lawyers is just a medium to deliver a story about what her life is like. It's a story about her. Let me repeat this. A story about lawyers is just a medium to deliver a story about this girl. All three things are things she is doing, or at least you're accusing her of doing these things. Third one, what if she interrupts you? Do you keep talking? Remember, the goal of a story is to get her to respond and start investing in a conversation. So if she interrupts you, it's a very good thing. Let's say she's a lawyer and you're doing the three things technique, and you say that one of the things you learn about lawyers is that they have to study so much that unless you have a master's degree, you're making coffees for everyone else in the office, and boom, she interrupts you. And this is amazing. This is exactly what you want. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna have a little chat about whatever information she just gave you, whether that's about studying law, working in a law firm, whatever. But then remember, this is only first of the three things in your story, so you chat about the first one a little bit if she interrupts you, and then you get back to your second thing in the story and you say, another thing I realized about lawyers, and you go into the second thing. And just in case she interrupts your first thing and that leads to a completely new different topic because maybe she studied in another country and you start talking about that and that's a completely new conversation, completely new topic, that is fine. You can always go back to the lawyer story later. Yeah, you talk about her studying abroad, you can explore that, what happened there, all of those things. And hey, by the way, another thing I realized about lawyers, so you can always jump back into that story, even 2, 3, 5 minutes later, it doesn't really matter. So it's completely fine if this conversation kind of goes into other direction. 3 tips on how to improve your storytelling. First, record and analyze your sets after each approach. Recording your sets is a great way to improve your storytelling, but what you have to do is you have to listen back to the recording right after you finish the set. You will hear what was the topic that came up, what was the story you used, and you can then think, hey, how can I improve this story the next time the topic comes up? What a lot of guys do is they record all the sets and then they think, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna listen back to it, and then I'm gonna try to learn something from these recordings, and that's gonna make my day game great. And this doesn't really work as well. Let's say you recorded 10 approaches, you go home, you find 7 mistakes you have to fix, then by the next time you go out, you remember about 3 of them. First 5 approaches are usually worse, you're kind of warming up, and only then you're starting to fix something, yeah? Whereas if you listen back to your approach, to your recordings after each approach, let's say you do the first approach, you listen back to it, hey, my voice was a little weak, in the next approach I'm gonna focus on my voice. You record the second set, you listen back to it, hey, voice was good, but I messed up stacking, I asked boring questions. In the next set I'm gonna focus on my stacking. And then third approach, you start doing a story, you get a topic you're already familiar with it. Lawyer, we talked about lawyers so many times, you listen back to that story and you're like, hey, I messed up the third thing in the story, it was a little bit boring, let me in the next one make sure that all 3 things in my stories are really, really good. So you're gonna be learning much, much faster this way. And listen, don't be an asshole. Don't put these recordings on YouTube or anywhere else. If you're recording infills and putting them for public use, then you're a fucking moron. That's one of the biggest problems in the Daygame community. This is why more and more people are turning against Daygame. This is why Daygame is viewed in such a negative light in places where there are a lot of Daygamers. I've gone out with girls from Daygame who know that there are Daygamers who are recording the conversations and putting them up on YouTube. Yeah, these girls had nothing against Daygame, they had very positive opinions about Daygame, but they thought that the guys who are recording conversations and uploading on YouTube are complete idiots, and I agree with these girls. Second thing you have to understand is that usually it takes multiple months of deliberate effort to learn storytelling. You can view this as multiple stages or multiple steps of learning storytelling. The first one being you start with boring copy-paste story, the same story for all professions, and you just use it to become comfortable with the idea of storytelling, with using 3 things technique and just being there and delivering a simple story. Second step, once you're comfortable with that, if the topic is her profession, you start by using a story that's 90% copy-paste and then you add 10% of improvisation. If the topic is anything else, then you use the 3 things technique to come up with basic, simple stories. Then once you're really good at the first and second steps, then you can move on to the third step, where instead of simply using 3 simple things, when I think about lawyers, I think about 3 things, A, B, and C, you expand these 3 things into 3 little stories. Don't skip the steps, start with 1 copy-paste story, then slowly learn more and more as you become more comfortable with the idea of storytelling. This is how you learn storytelling. I don't know of any ways to any shortcuts or any ways to do this faster. It will normally take months for you to learn this. And the third thing is, if this isn't working, if you're not seeing progress week after week, then you're not seeing your mistakes. One of 2 main reasons guys aren't progressing in their day game is they're not seeing their mistakes. Or maybe they're seeing their mistakes, but they're making 10 big mistakes and they don't know which 1 or 2 of these mistakes are the most important ones they have to fix first to get ahead in day game. If you want me to listen to some of your recorded Daygame conversations, point out your biggest mistakes and tell you exactly how to fix them step by step, then you can join my online coaching program. I have a very hands-on approach. Each of my students takes a lot of my time, so to make sure I have enough time and energy for each student, I don't work with more than 10 students at the same time. So you can be confident you will get enough hands-on guidance from me. You can find out everything about how the program usually works, the approximate pricing, etc. by clicking the link in description. Well guys, this is almost all of the theory you need to learn Daygame. I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. So thank you for listening and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao guys.